Hey friends, hi!
A big hello to everyone.
Today we're going to share 10 tips for fishing with a float rod in the spring. We'll try to share everything we know, right? Yes, all sorts of my own developments and different tricks with life hacks. So, let's go! First of all, everyone should remember that early in the spring the water is still quite cold and the fish can be very finicky. So, you shouldn't expect a fantastic bite right away. But you can still catch some fish and you should definitely go fishing. The first and most important thing, friends, is the presence of fish in the river. The most important thing, as I always say, is the fishing spot. It's more important than anything else. Tackle, fishing rods, floats, bait, lures, baits, and everything else. If the place is such that there are no fish there, or they don't go there, no matter how you knit, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you try, you will not succeed. Therefore, choose a place where you know or have fished before.
The spot is all. You especially need to choose areas that are warmed by the sun.
Yes, right. These should be spots that are warmed by the sun, where there is no strong current. It shouldn't be the riverbed, it should be some calm current, or a spot where there's an eddy where the fish can use as little energy as possible to swim, because it's still hard for them to do that. The spot should be warmed up. It could be a bay. The spot should be warmed up. It could be a bay. It may be the edge of the bay. So the places should be such that the fish will feel comfortable, where the water temperature will be higher, rather than in the channel, because there is nothing for her to do there now. If you come and cast where there is a current, where there are holes, big ones, the water there is cold, it warms up for a very long time. And right now, after winter, the fish want to warm up, especially before spawning. Every fish comes out looking for spawning grounds. And as a rule, these spawning grounds are shallow bays that warm up.
And now we will tell you what gear you need to choose to fish in cold water.
Friends, your gear and equipment are also very important. Because if you have coarse tackle, a heavy float, a big hook, the fish will be cautious and won't bite. And right now it's very cautious. In general, we tell the guys that fish are smarter than any girl. So catching it is quite difficult. But still, we know some tricks that we will share with you. So where do we start? Look. First of all, I want to say that the line you fish with should be thin. Let's say we're using a pole fishing rod. I have the main line on this spool. I have a 0.16 to 0.18 leader here. And on this line, I use either 0.10 or 0.12 material. Usually in early spring, I use fluorocarbon, thin fluorocarbon. You can use regular monofilament line, but fluorocarbon is a bit more transparent, so the fish don't notice it as much. This is a size 23 hook. I want to pause for a moment to elaborate a bit more.
Choose hooks that are more delicate and smaller, guys, when it comes to hooks.
There's one nuance. Look, in spring I use hooks without a eye, but with a paddle. In my opinion, a hook with a paddle looks much more delicate and the fish are less afraid of it. It's harder to tie it, but visually it seems smaller. There's also a nuance with the hook. If, for example, the same hook is made from different wire of the same size. Let's say the hook is roughly a size 12, but it might look coarser, and this one will be much more delicate. Why? The wire that this hook is made from is thin, tempered wire. It's slim and good, while this wire is coarser and cheaper. And the hook visually looks much bigger. This too, it scares the fish away. Pay attention to what material the hook is made from and how it looks. The main thing is that you visually like all of this. When you thread the bait, make sure it completely covers the hook's point and its base. Here, for example, is what a hook with a paddle looks like. At the end, it doesn't have a duck, but a small paddle. Here, look, it's a hook with a paddle. Visually, it looks smaller than a hook with an eye. You can't see the wire at all. For example, let's take a maggot, which we all fish with. The hook is small. It will be about the same size as the maggot. And when we thread the maggot onto the hook, it will completely cover it. And the fish won't see it at all. We thread the maggot onto the hook here. Whoa! Place it down. The hook hardly interferes with the maggot at all. The maggot even has the strength to move it from its place. And if you thread 2 or 3 maggots or even add some bloodworms in there, then, well, it looks very elegant and delicate. And if you thread the maggot in a stocking style, it will completely cover the wire of the hook.
It's also very important to choose the right float.
Friends, the float. This is very important. It's important, first of all, that you feel comfortable while fishing, above all. And secondly, it's its weight. The floats should be very light because the fish bites are now delicate. And you need to pick up a float so that it doesn't feel it at all when it bites. Guys, is there anyone who wants to say thank you if you have the opportunity? I will leave a link to my crypto wallet in the description under this video. You can send any amount there. I will be very grateful to everyone. Well, if not, I just ask you to write a comment under this video and like this video. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe to my channel. There will be a lot more interesting instructional videos on all topics. Typically, we use floats weighing from 0.5 gram to 3 grams for spring fishing. If we're fishing in a shallow bay where there's absolutely no current, no wind, and at shallow depths we use a light float with spread out weights. Let's say this little guy, this tiny float. If we're fishing where there's a slight gentle current, a little twist like this, and we know for sure that there's fish there, we can use a float up to 3 grams. For example, something like this. The main thing, guys, is that you feel comfortable because all floats are different. See, it is also important that the float antenna, it was convenient for you to have a thin antenna like this one. If you have poor visual vision at a distance of 10 meters, you will hardly see the bite. And there is such a thick antenna, so you must decide for yourself what is better for you, what is convenient for you. There is a color, like this 2-color. There is a color, like this the antenna is completely filled, friends. That's why the floats are made so that you can choose for yourself, because first of all, fishing is convenience. Convenience for you.
I like this float because it has a dual color scheme and it's easy to visually track from a distance. The antenna is 2 colors.
Fishing rod. What rod to fish? Friends, I have 2 fishing rods in my hands. A whip rod and a feeder rod. A feeder rod is a rod with a reel, but unfortunately during its assembly, a light float won't work. You need at least 3 grams so you can cast it far with this line. This tackle is good when the fish are biting well. You can also catch in the spring, but still, my top recommendation is what I suggest to you. What I like is the fly rod, which is without rings, which is wound for you. I wind it up and I attach it very easily using a rubber band. I'm actually fine with that because when I go fishing, it's really convenient. I just come, take it off. Just like that, put the rubber band in your pocket. And you immediately start unwinding your whip tackle. When you have all of them wound on your reel, your line is less likely to deteriorate. It doesn't go in arcs, as we know, because on the reel, it always stays straight. This rod doesn't have guides, so you won't get tangled in the reeds and other vegetation as much.
I also like the float rod because when you cast the cylinder, everything hangs off the rings and gets tangled in the reeds. And when we cast the pole rod, all its equipment is in the water and you control it yourself. And it's really convenient to cast into the reeds and more hard to reach spots. Yeah, it doesn't get caught at all, guys.
So in places where fish inhabit near the reeds in the spring, it's really convenient to work everywhere in the grass. When assembling the gear, it is also important to AK, you will be setting up the weight, whether it will be spread out or not, and why is it so important for your weight to be set up this way. Guys, so that your float, well, just the little antenna sticks out a bit, just a little bit. When there was a bite on the drop, you saw, for example, the white part, or you saw the little bobber, this black one, and the little antenna was slightly weighted. But again, it's all a matter of personal preference. What's most important here? So that it doesn't stick out much. Why? If a lot is sticking out during a bite, fish, when it bites, it will feel resistance. Even if you use a 3-gram float, weight it like this. Roughly speaking, just up to the little antenna here, and the fish will bite. It will feel less resistance than with a 2-gram float, which will stick out quite a bit from the water. You got it? You need to submerge it a bit more. And there's one nuance for you. How to properly set up the tackle. If the float is light, you can set up the tackle and the weight basically like I do when I have the shot weights all placed down here at the bottom. Go. It doesn't matter how they are, bigger or smaller. When it's very light, it's not a big deal. You can attach everything at the bottom. The leader here is quite short. Many will say right, wrong, friends. In the conditions where we fish, I like it exactly this way. It's exactly when the weights go. On the contrary, the big ones are at the bottom and the small ones are at the top. But the right way to do it, as they say, is completely different. At the bottom we have the smallest weights, which are the shot weights, and at the top we have the bigger ones. Now I'll show you how it's done. Look, we're taking off the top, the lightest weight. From here, you can easily squeeze the shot weights with our nails, and we're taking it off. The two top weights, I'm sending it higher up, right here by the float. So you see, this is the distance we have. You can make it even longer depending on how deep you're fishing. Let's say 1/2 meter, right? Top, so 2 shot weights. Here I have, or rather the main weights, they are at the top going up. Here I have a large distance, and below there is one, or a light shepherd. Weight. Here I have a hook, a leash, right? And the shot weight is coming next. The line is quite short. Now watch how this rig works. As soon as we cast, the weights sink the float and it goes into its working position. Well, the antenna sticks out like this, you see. Here, the antenna sticks out like this for us. Very much high up. When the hook itself goes lower, with this weight, which is called a small shot weight, yes, it can be 1 or 2, depending on how much you have. A heavy float weighs 2 grams, 3 grams or more, and the float, when the weight pulls like this, the float goes into its working position. As a rule, this is the working position. As I said, the antenna sticks out like this for us. This is how it sticks out to us, and then we can already feel all the bites. And the fish does not feel resistance if you are fishing from the bottom, and your task is to catch the fish that are small fish on the bottom. You're fed up with the ones that swim in the water column, and you want to get your bait down to the bottom as quickly as possible so it doesn't drift. You just take all these weights like I do and drop them down like this. Boom. Is everything down here for you? The rig is below. This way, your bait, whether it's a worm, maggot or larvae, quickly sinks to the bottom. And that's it. So you can also use a float rod. You can adjust all of this. You can set the pace of your fishing. You can make it so that your bait slowly sinks to the bottom to catch fish on the drop, the most active ones. And you can do it this way if you're fishing for bream there. Some, yes, catching bream from the bottom so it passes through the water column as quickly as possible and catches small bleak there. Roughly speaking, it didn't bother you.
And now we will tell you about the most promising spots for fishing. In spring,
Friends, I want to tell you that earlier in the spring, you can go fishing on a sunny day, not right from the morning. In my opinion, in my experience, I've noticed that fish start biting as the water warms up. So around 10, 11 or 12 in the afternoon, the maximum peak of the bite happens when the sun's rays warm up the bays and shallow areas. Where to fish? These are some sandy beaches, shallows, bays, the entrance to the bay, and the drop-off on the sunny side. For example, if we know that here where I am there is a large strip of forest and the sun rises over there, it's always dark here. But when the sun rises up there by noon, I know that it warms up this area. And the fish here bites better from noon. That's why we're trying to fish here with you. Don't look for, as I said, depth and dig down into the channel. No, we fish where it's warm. We want to tell you a bit about the bait to use. Our favorite bait for early spring, this is garlic. Garlic, friends. The main thing is not to overdo it. Remember one simple golden rule. There should be just a little bit of bait. Just a bit. If you give too much, the fish might get scared. And don't choose very strong smells. Because even garlic bait can be different because we've come across various kinds.
which is just a hint of garlic, so light that you can hear it across half the river, and here the boats are really strong. Really strong.
Yes, so make sure to check out trusted bait manufacturers. Another good option is chocolate. Chocolate bait works really well too. You were catching bream again. Bream always, yes, in cold water. Chocolate and garlic. But still, I would stick with the garlic. You can catch absolutely any fish. Roach, bream, rudd, crucian carp. They especially love garlic bait. In general, if you, for example, are going to make a bait, mix semolina and add a couple of drops of garlic to it. That will also be a big plus. Yes, a natural attractant. You can also do a bit of this with the bait experiment. Well, let's pause on the baits now and talk about them in more detail. So regarding baits, in my opinion, in early spring, the number one thing will be bloodworms. Bloodworm, friends, is what you need for fishing. Number two will be some kind of doe, chatterbox, semolina. Light, something that can be caught. As we mentioned, you can add a little garlic and some homemade sunflower oil for the scent. Then comes the maggot. Something like that. Then comes the maggot. And also, friends, the manure worm.
Especially after winter, bloodworms remain a priority, as the fish have been biting on them all winter and have gotten used to them even without them when fishing.
In cold water in early spring, no way at all, friends. A worm is a very good bait in early spring. Fish love it. It's meaty, and you can catch absolutely all kinds of fish with worms, starting from roach and going all the way to big perch and crucian carp. It's really great if you can find worms somewhere near the river. It's exactly in the planting near the river or right by the riverbank, because these are the worms that the fish are used to. When it rains, all of this gets washed into the water, and along with it, the worms go in too. The fish have gotten used to feeding on them, they've gotten used to coming close to the shore, getting used to these kinds. Like the drop-offs, for example, like this one. And here, just like that, the fish will bite and eat these worms. So guys, number one. For the river, and for river number one, it is absolutely a natural bait. These are the worms that are dug up here, not the ones brought from the store. Because these are the worms that it's used to. Last year we did this a lot with Ivanic. We would come here and dig. Before that, Diamond and I used to do this in our childhood, and we caught some good fish on them. Give it a try for sure.
When fishing early in the spring, you shouldn't always stay in one spot. You always need to feed several points, like here, for example. Or nearby, right here. And exactly the same in those two spots.
You shouldn't stay in one spot. The fish won't settle in one spot right now, like they do in the summer when the water is warm. You need to do it right. Diamond said to feed in one place, in the second, in the third.
So, you will have a much better chance of catching something, friends. And the sandwich bait also works very well when you hook a bloodworm together with a maggot. First we have 3 maggots and 1 bloodworm. First we hook 3 moths, then the maggot.
The sandwich bait is more effective for the fishermen than for the fish. Because the fish would eat a plain maggot, but it can knock it off the hook very quickly. To prevent that from happening, we hook 1 bloodworm on there, plus the bloodworm is light colored. It has a light color, yes, which really attracts fish, especially when the water is murky. This white piece attracts fish very well to this bait, and it bites excellently, like roach and bream, friends. That's why we really love it when the sandwich bait works great. Plus, Kostin, you see, the bloodworm is much livelier, which also attracts and irritates the fish, right? They see it and it all draws them in. So always try and experiment. In general, in the spring, when the sun warms up, the fish bites differently. It can bite until lunchtime. After lunch, the thing is, guys, yes, the thing is that the roach, for example, can the sun warm up nicely in the morning, and can the roach come out to the base to bite when everything has warmed up well? So, it's also worth considering whether you just want to fish and relax, or if you're heading out specifically to catch fish. I'll tell you a little story. Once Diamond and I tried to bait the spot in the evening. We arrived in the evening and well fed the spot. And in the morning we arrived, and it was occupied by other fishermen. Therefore, friends, never rely on tricks. Do as you need and as you feel comfortable. If you decide to go tomorrow, go tomorrow. If there are fish, they'll come to your bait tomorrow. Don't come up with anything in advance. Well, I hope this information and advice will be useful to you. You knew some of it, and you learned something new for yourself. Yes, that's right. That's right. Guys, may you always have fish, and may the crucian carp
always takes the worm in its mouth.
May you always be with fish, but the main thing is don't take more than you need. In spring,
main thing isn't fish but joy.
It's not about catching fish, just going fishing. Remember that in spring there is a spawning period and a period of restrictions, when it's allowed to fish and when it's not. There are always fish, of course. Restrictions on catch limits. It's also important to always stick to them, because the fines are quite hefty,